Hi, so here we go. This is my first video, and the topic is about the relationship with my parents. So just to start off, like any other Asian family, of both my parents are Vietnamese and very typical Asian parents. So at the beginning, earlier on, I got my ass beat. My parents were always harping on about education. They spent way too much money on me. I'll talk about that later on, and also comparisons to other people in terms of comparison to the the, the kids of their family friends, comparisons to their friends themselves, just comparing everything about the kids to something else, to someone else, or themselves to others as well. So comparison, beatings, education, yeah, typical Asian family parents growing up. All right, so let's take it all the way back to the beginning. So both my parents are Vietnamese. They left during the Vietnam War, so after 1975, migrated over to Australia, and that's where I was born along with my two youngest brothers. So in my family, got three boys. Got my dad, and my mum is the only female in our family. So a lot of testosterone going on in our family. Mum being the only female. And yeah, so very early on, I got my ass beaten a lot, especially from my dad. No surprise there, but I definitely, because I deserved it. I was a little hellraiser, a little shit growing up. This really very emotionally immature for so much of my early life, my young teens, even through university, even through getting a full-time job. Yeah, just really matured very later on in life, and very early on, my parents, I blame my parents a lot for a lot of things, especially in my early teens, because that's how things were. Like, my parents and me will never like, how you doing, every single day kind of thing. No, there's no hugs, no kisses. There would have been like early on when we were still kids, but as an adult, never hugged my parents, never hugged my mom, my dad. Um, but that's just the way things were, and I resented my parents a lot during those early years because they had their way of thinking. Though, like looking back, there's things like me wanting to go out with friends. Like I remember, I remember one birthday where my friends had already at the birthday party, and I couldn't go. I didn't let them know because we. This is before mobile phones, so we're still on landline phones, and my friend called me up on my landline, and I just said I couldn't go, and then I was just yelling at my parents, slamming the door, all that kind of stuff, and it's like they didn't explain themselves. Like I didn't communicate well with them, they didn't communicate well with me, and um, I just hated them for like not understanding what I wanted. But during that time, all they really cared about. No, my parents worked really, really hard. We were never poor, but also we were never rich. But my parents always provided for all of us. There was never a day that we went without food or basic necessities. There was never none of that. My parents were so hardworking, always providing for the family. Um, I used to get beaten a lot because I was always starting fights with my younger brothers. My mum used to say that I was really good at arguing in the house, but when I went outside, I would never say a word, and that's so true because I was such a introvert even back then. Um, I was talking back a lot, and I used to get beatings a lot from my dad, like whatever he could get his hands on. Um, and I remember the day when it stopped, when the beating stopped, was when I stood up to him. So it would have to have been before university. So when I was still in high school, there was a day where, now I was always a scrawny kid growing up, but I had finally stood up to my dad, and that was when finally the beating stopped. And I'll keep saying this again, that I completely deserved all the beatings I got because I was complete shit when I was much younger. But when I got into university, things were a lot better. Or before that, just before university, it was in high school in Australia. And we had back then it was like in Victoria, it was the enter was like, I guess in American to be, I'm not sure the SATs is for university for high school, but the enter was your final score from high school to get into university. And because I was the oldest, there was always an expectation that I was going to get in the high 90s out of 100. My parents threw so much money for extra education. I remember going, like, Kumon was a big thing back then. And like we had all these other different tutors that on weekends after school, Vietnamese school on Saturday, my parents just chucked so much money thinking that just by paying for me to go to do all these extra tutors that I was going to do well in my high school enter score. And that was far from the case, because no matter how much additional education my parents paid for, it just did not go through my mind. My mind was just not capable. It was not conditioned. It was just, I just could not handle. And taking tests, I did not excel in that. I did not apply myself during the year of my studies as well. I was a bad student, honestly, and it was a big disappointment when I got my enter score, because I was in the high 70s, which I got 78 on my enter, and in my world, my parents' world, in their circle, that was like a fail. I mean, people were getting the high 90s, 95. I was expecting I was going to get in high 95s, but to get me to 78, it crushed. I remember it really crushed my mom, because when I told my mom the score, like, it was like she got embarrassed, because then she knew that she's gonna have to tell all her friends, and because I had the family friend group they had was very similar age to me, so everyone was comparing each other. And I remember just laying in bed after I told my mom my score, and man, that was literally one of the worst times of my high school years. Like, just disappointing my parents, disappointing myself. But I eventually I was still able to get into engineering at RMIT. I wasn't able to go to Melbourne or Monash, but I got into engineering RMIT, which is still RMIT is still one of the best schools for engineering. So I was lucky in that sense. But yeah, just a big disappointment. I wish my parents didn't have waste so much money on me back then, because I couldn't. I tried to tell my parents that, just well, no matter how much I said, like I'm just not good at school, or there was no other option. I had no other alternatives. Like, it was, my parents were the rule of law. They paid for it, and I just went. Man, but it was the worst for me. Them wasting all that money on me, on my education, and I wasn't able to deliver. It was embarrassing. It was, yeah, definitely one of the worst times. But eventually, with time, that went away. I, and also luckily, I've got a brother, 2 years behind me, and both my brothers did a lot better than me, so that was a big relief. But yeah, being the oldest and the first one to go through this as well, I mean, it was a really difficult time. I really don't know how I got through it. I think through high school, because I got bullied as well, like I had really thick skin, and I just kept moving forward. I had my moments where I was really down, but I don't know how, but I just kept going. And luckily things in university got a lot better. So once that miserable stage of high school went out the way, university was a completely different world. So much more freedom. I got a part-time job. First went to McDonald's and went to a call center, and so much more freedom. Start to mature a little bit, but not that much. But yeah, university life was a lot better. Still did not apply myself to my studies in university, but in university, my relationship with my parents it got better, but we still didn't communicate that much. I'm trying to remember back to my university days, and we definitely had a lot less arguments. There were no more beatings in university. And going to my full-time job, and then from I think growing up until the end of high school was probably the worst time with my parents at that young stage. But when I finally got to university, things got a lot better. I was making I was working part time, just like McDonald's and call center work, and so I was able to have a bit of money for myself, and so wasn't as reliant on my parents anymore. When I finally got my full time job in engineering, things were okay with my parents. And then when I went to quit my job and tell my parents I was going to move to Vietnam, that was a big pivotal moment in our lives. I was dreading the day of doing it, but at the same time I was looking forward to it, because I was expecting a lot of pushback and rejection from my parents when I was going to talk to them about my plans. But to my surprise, I want to say they didn't accept it straight away, but they didn't argue against it. And I know why, because I had the conviction, because in my mind I had gone through the day in my mind so much in the weeks and months beforehand, because I knew quitting my job that I hated and moving to the motherland was something I wanted to do. And what I conveyed to my parents was no one else was forcing me to, because I knew my parents were going to ask, like, who is, like, is someone, has someone got this into your mind? Is someone making you go to Vietnam? Something like that. But I remember this so clearly because it was a pivotal moment in my life where one night in the kitchen, I sat my parents down and said, like, I have something to tell you. And I remember saying to them, like, just don't say anything until, like, I've said everything I've said, because, like, I've really thought this through. And I was so confident, I had so much conviction that I said to them that I made up my mind that I'm quitting my job that I hate. I saved up money. I previously bought a house as well, which they knew about. And I'm moving to Vietnam because this is something I want to do. And my parents were saying, out of all the countries to move to, why Vietnam? And I said to them, because I'm Vietnamese, and you're Vietnamese. Like, I was born here, but I've been Vietnamese. I've been back to Vietnam on holidays, but I want to live there. And my parents were taken aback because, like, they didn't expect this was coming. I'm pretty sure, like, I'd never hinted at this at all to them. I've told my friends and all that, but it came as a surprise to them. But of course, at the start, they were in disbelief. They couldn't believe I was quitting my job. My mum, was all worried about leaving your job. You're finally making good money. you've done all the university to get here. Why are you quitting now? What if you can't find another job when you come back? So I understand my mom's point of view. They're always worried about how you're going to provide for yourself. So I get that. But they eventually came around when they I'm sure it was because they saw the conviction in me, because I knew I wanted to do this for myself. I wasn't getting pressured by anyone else. I had made a game plan for myself. This is what I want to do. I've set up my own money, and I really wanted to move and live in Vietnam. My parents have come and gone to Vietnam many times before, so I know a lot of people's parents have a different relationship with Vietnam, but my parents have a really good relationship with Vietnam. And I never have these talks with my parents. I think so. This was when I came out and they saw the conviction in me. I'm convinced that that was why they didn't push back, or my mom and dad, had the reservations, of course, but surprisingly, my dad was first to come around, and he's like, yeah, okay, if you want to do this for yourself. And yeah, I was surprised how fast my dad came around, but my mom took a little bit longer convincing. And up to the day that until I left Australia, my mom was always worried about how I was going to get another job and how I was going to make money. Even when I came over here, my mom was calling me every so often and just worried about me, because I was here all by myself, and I had always had to reassure my mom that I wanted to be here because I wanted to be here and I'm safe. And this was before COVID as well, and so I was actually happy to be in Asia than the Western world during COVID, but that's a story for another time. But my mom was always concerned when I was living here in earlier years, every time she called. But eventually, now that I've been 5-6 years in, my mom my mom's less worried now, and dad. But just to wrap things up, now my relationship is great with my parents. I talk to them a lot more. I'm less angry with them nowadays. I remember, I'm not sure if it was this year or might have been early this year or last year when mum came over, and no, when I left Australia, my mum hugged me like when I was leaving the airport, at the airport, and yeah, she hugged me, and like we've never really done that, and of course I hugged her back. I've never hugged my dad. We've never hugged as an adult, but that's just how we are. But I've learned this from somewhere. I can't remember where, but I resonated so much with it now, being much older. But I used to blame my parents so much when I was younger. But now, looking back, it wasn't my parents' fault. It was the conditions they came from, and it was my grandparents that have conditioned them to be who they are. But my parents left during the war, and they were so young. They were in like the 20s when they had me, and they fled Vietnam. Recently, at the end of last year, we lost our grandma, my mum's mum, and I've only ever had one grandparent, which is my grandma, growing up, and I was never close to my grandma because it was just we never had that connection. Whenever I saw my grandma, my grandma was much older. She had dementia. So it was difficult to communicate with my grandma. And I've never known my granddad, my mum's dad, never known my grandparents from my dad's side. And now I don't have any grandparents at all. But I know my parents are going to be great grandparents to my kids. Like I've never said this to my parents, but like inside I've forgiven them. But then when I say that, there was nothing to forgive. I mean, it's my parents had me when I was so young. They were fleeing a war in their homeland. I mean, I look back when I was in my 20s and I could have never done what they did. My parents, I know I gave them a hard time for raising me. I mean, they did the best that they could. I love my parents. And even though I don't say that to them, they don't say that to me, we love each other, and that's just how things are. Like, we don't always hug each other, kiss each other, or ask each other how our days are. But like, I know when I have kids, my relationship with my parents is going to be even closer. But now I'm extremely happy with the relationship with my parents. Like, I've learned to just going back to the day when I had a discussion with my parents that I was leaving. Up until that point, I had really worked on my communication with my parents. So it was on my part. I really learned how to communicate with my parents a lot better. But yeah, it's definitely the communication. It's probably the most communication and trying to understand not your parents' point of view as such, but just the circumstances of how they were raised and how they were brought up, and the conditions and circumstances that they've been through. Like, I never considered that when I was much younger. I was always blaming my parents. Why are they doing this? Why am I not a certain way? Why am I so different? Why are they so different? But now, like, my parents had come over to Vietnam to visit me. To both of them live with me where I am. For like last time I came over, they lived with me for 1 month, but they've been traveling in Vietnam, so they come back, but they stay with me. The last time they were back, I really had good talk to them. Like, I sat that down and we really communicated, probably the best we've communicated through the whole of my life, because I'm trying to, I don't know what's the word, but recondition some of their old school Asian conditioning, such as comparisons with other people. And my mum, I hate to say this, but she's super negative a lot of the times. But I understand now that it's not so much negativity, but she's so concerned with things not working out and things failing. But what I've been able to do is trying to help her rewire her thinking and mindset by saying, instead of it not working out, what if you could imagine things working out for your son, for yourself? Why can't you imagine things working out? But that's not what she's used to, because she's been conditioned to think the worst. What if this fails? What are you going to do? How is this going to impact you? And I don't blame her. I don't judge her. But I'm trying to help and support her to think on a similar way to I think, but more positive. What happens when it does work out? What if it can work out? it will work out. And my mum's stubborn, just like me, and it's hard for her to change straight away. I didn't expect that, but at least I've planted the seed. Because, and I've said to her, my dad, I remember my dad saying to me this last visit, why don't you call your mum more? Like, your mum wants to hear from you. And he said that off to the side when my mum wasn't listening. And so when I was talking to both of them, I said to my mum, sometimes I don't want to talk to you because you are so negative. And I was saying that honestly, from a position of love. I wasn't talking down to my mum, but I was saying that because I loved her. And I do call my mum more than I used to. And that's because I do love my parents. And so I'm trying to help change my mum's mindset to be more positive and not be so negative. And she is coming around slowly, but stubbornly, as we all are. But I'm happy to just to have that conversation with her from a place of love. And I keep saying that things will be even better when I have kids because I know they're going to be great grandparents. But I don't want to wait until that time. I don't know, in my mind, I keep thinking that when I have kids, it'll be the best time to show more love and communicate better with my parents. But I'm trying to do more of that even now before I have kids. But I'm really happy that I have this relationship with my parents now where I do love them and I know they love me. Even though we don't say those words to each other or hug each other every day, we know we love each other. Considering how things were when I was much younger, because they were really bad. I wasn't happy with myself. I wasn't happy with the relationship with my parents when I was younger. So I was happy how things have turned out now and how I realized that I don't blame my parents for the way that they are. I don't even blame my grandparents, but I understand, or I've tried to understand, the circumstances and situations of how they were raised and what they've gone through. And that's helped me to better our relationship together. So, thank you for watching. I hope by sharing this small part of my story, it can provide some discussing points for whoever's watching. I hope you have a loving and happy relationship with your parents. Feel free to let me know if you want to discuss anything down in the comments down below. But yeah, thank you for watching and listening to my story. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers. Willis out.